Swaikab and welcome to this video where I'm using a lens that I stopped using for quite a while, this 35 f1.6 lens, which I won't get into too much. In the next video I would go into more detail, and it wouldn't exactly be a review but more like a analysis of the lens. And its bokeh is quite interesting in the sense that it is maybe definitely designed not to have edge-to-edge sharpness, and in this photo walk it would just be the general use case of the lens itself and just trying to manual focus at f1.6. Some of the shots at least are definitely not sharp on point, but it's also a personal discussion and idea that I wanted to make later on in the next video about what would be considered as soft yet acceptable images compared to completely missed and out of focused images, since some people would maybe mix the two together, where something that is soft is considered completely out of focus when maybe there's still some value to the image itself. Not to say all of the image shown here are sort of soft and acceptable, but that's sort of the point where I'll get into the details in the next video. But for now, hope you enjoyed this walk, and I will give a few more commentaries later on. So in this section, I wanted to just give a more detailed about the lens itself and its general sort of softness on the edges on a still subject. Trying to focus on moving subjects is definitely hard. That can cause human error. So here you can sort of see some of the flares as well, and just see the character of the lens, and I'll get into more detail in the next video once again. Here is also an interesting scene to see that the center sharpness is there if done correctly, but even the people in the same focal plane field just goes very blurred on the edges of the screen, especially when I do my sort of personal favorite wide crop factor. This isn't expand crop factor, but it's around, I think it was 2:1 crop factor, so relatively wider than normal. So here on this bike I went down to f5.6 if I remember correctly, and then the sharpness certainly increased obviously with any other lens, and the edges of the wheel got much sharper and clearer to see, and I think it's more pleasing. Like some of the photos in the beginning of the video, I purposefully overexposed, and this is sort of something that I still want to experiment with, and not to justify that it's a style since I don't do it for all of my image, but basically is to sort of save the shadows and make the shadow area that I wanted to capture the main focal point, and anything that is overexposed, I would just purposefully try not to sort of pull down the highlight, since it's just stuff that is not important anyway, so blow them out just so that there's no information for the viewer to see, and so they would just see where the darker and higher contrast area is in the first place. Basically the opposite of what other street photographers do, where they sort of crush the shadows to make it more geometric for people to see, but it's still a work in progress. First image here was how the two people are sort of walking on opposite directions, and when they have their hands sort of stretching out in a similar fashion, and a small interaction between the police officer and the old lady. Though I don't really like the background of the car being black, that it is sort of giving sort of not enough contrast between the person and the background. And in the next image there was the perfect car where it's a truck that is completely white, and now it sort of brings out the two persons much forward, giving that separation, but then the pose itself is not really as good. And it was one of these cases where someone just walked directly into my frame, and at the time I was trying to take a picture of the person in the background and focus on them, but this old lady with her baby walked into the frame, and it was perfectly into sort of the focus zone that I had at the time, and I just sort of captured the image. In my usual sort of way of walking in street photography, I wouldn't spend too much time, usually at least, to sort of stay in the scene and then take a couple photos. I would usually walk and take photos as I go, and sometimes that can be a bad habit, and it's definitely a bad habit here with a manual focus lens at f1.6. And the first shot was obviously blurred, but in the next one it's then becomes quite sharp, so I was quite pleased while walking and then adjusting the focus to get the shot in focus in the second time around. Though the guy's eyes looking out into the distance, I don't think it really helped too much, and would prefer if he were looking directly into the camera. It might have been a little bit more interesting. We are playing around with the style once again, just increasing and exaggerating the contrast and the haze to just bring out the skies a little bit and shapes of the clouds, and just playing around with seeing how the moon just so happens to be in between the two lines of the crane. I figured that I wanted to try just purposefully changing the aspect ratio within the camera, so I just set it to 1:1 square crop, and I feel like it might have helped just a little bit more, seeing that I will have to focus the center area of the frame anyways, which I should have been doing all this time, but with the wider like 3:2 aspect ratio, I get to sort of see where things are in focus on the edges, which becomes distracting. But now that I set it to 1:1, it's able to allow me to be more focused and seeing sort of directly in the center of the frame and try to sort of focus. Though while editing some of the raw images, I still get to keep the entire full sort of sensor image, and then I get to recrop once more to see more context later on. So I did not really keep the square crop throughout the remaining part of this photo walk, but I do try to sort of keep the square original crop as much as I can. So whenever you see the square crop, that is the original crop, and then anything else is just me finding a new sort of crop aspect ratio that I much prefer, and I'll show a couple more examples in the next video. So in this last section, while the person is coming into frame, is one of my sort of favorite photos and moments out of the walk. Is just this lady riding a bicycle with her child, and she just came very close to me, and it was just sort of, you know, capturing the sort of decisive moment that people like to talk about a lot, and the framing of the sort of child in the square crop with the mother is very tight, and just something that I really liked, how it just came together. Even though this is sort of one of the examples where it's sort of soft, not ultra sharp yet, the contrast in sort of the child's eyes and the mother's hand not blocking the eye of the child too much, the mother herself still can see her eyes a little bit. There's still sort of enough contrast to let us know what is going on, even though it's not the sharpest thing, and it's sort of something that I would still have to figure out, and maybe I will have to find my own balance, or something that I will sort of seek out in other photographers as well, of how do they sort of balance what is expected to be really sharp, or what is acceptably soft that is not considered completely out of focus. And in the last image here, just another mother with her children, and as I take a photo from the distance, she seems to see me and then just gave me this smile that I really love again. And this is sort of the exact sort of crop that I had in the square crop aspect ratio, so I really like this sort of last photo as well. With that case, that is the end of this vlog, and I hope you enjoy. Not exactly the next video will be talking about this lens, but I wanted to do a behind the scene and secondary sort of lens analysis, not review, but just analysis of the lens that I used for a previous video from this one, which was the spring challenge video, where I use other vintage lenses that are definitely very soft, but then when you stop down you get a little bit more sharpness. And I was quite surprised because there was a lot of light which exposes the image quite well, and was still able to maybe retain a little bit more detail and quality that I was not exactly expecting when shooting with this lens in the past. It was very soft, and then now there might be sort of ways to work around it and adapt and improvise. So yeah, just be sure to subscribe, and there's quite a lot of videos that I suddenly have in mind to try to do, including this sort of square crop aspect ratio that I want to do in the near future again, and do a full photo walk in the square aspect ratio as well. So be sure to look forward to that. With that said, I will see you all next time, and thank you for watching. Bye for now.